The whispers started the day Fiona Oakley was born during a blood moon, and by the time she turned 18 in the spring of 1876, every soul in Gila Bend, Arizona believed she carried death in her shadow. Fiona had learned to walk with her eyes down and her shoulders hunched, making herself small as she moved through the dusty streets of the desert town. The Apache called the land around Gila Bend home first, and the harsh terrain seemed to mirror the harshness she faced daily. The sun beat mercilessly on the adobe buildings, and the Gila River curved through the landscape like a lifeline in an otherwise unforgiving wilderness. She had been 17 when her mother died of fever, and the town elders nodded knowingly. Her father had perished in a mining accident when she was 14, crushed beneath a rockslide. Before that, her older brother drowned in the river at 12, pulled under by currents while Fiona watched helplessly from the bank. Every loss added weight to the curse they believed she carried, and the townspeople kept their distance as if misfortune itself might leap from her skin to theirs. Now 18, Fiona lived alone in the small adobe house at the edge of town, the one with the crumbling wall and the garden that refused to grow anything but weeds. She made her living washing clothes for the wealthier families, who left their laundry in baskets outside their doors so they would not have to face her directly. Payment came the same way, coins left in a tin box, as if her touch might taint the money itself. The afternoon heat shimmered off the dirt road as Fiona carried her water buckets toward the river. Her dark auburn hair, so long it reached her waist, hung in a thick braid down her back. Her face might have been called beautiful if anyone had bothered to look past their superstitions. High cheekbones, a straight nose dusted with freckles from the relentless sun, and eyes the color of spring moss. But beauty meant nothing when people crossed themselves as you passed. She had just knelt by the riverbank, filling her first bucket, when she heard the screaming. A child's voice, high and terrified, came from downstream where the current ran faster. Fiona dropped her bucket and ran, her worn boots kicking up sand and stones. She rounded the bend and saw little Tommy Martinez, the blacksmith's 5-year-old son, being pulled rapidly away by the current. His small arms flailed desperately. Fiona did not hesitate. She plunged into the water, her long skirts immediately becoming heavy and dragging. The current fought her with every stroke, but she was a strong swimmer despite what people thought. Her brother's death had taught her respect for the water, and she had learned its ways in the years since. She pushed harder, her muscles burning as she cut through the current at an angle, using the water's force rather than fighting it directly. Her fingers caught Tommy's shirt just as his head went under. She hauled him up with strength born of desperation, wrapping one arm around his small body while she fought to keep them both above water. The current had pulled them far downstream now, and the bank seemed impossibly distant. Her legs kicked furiously, but her sodden skirts were like anchors. A shadow fell across the water. A man stood on a large boulder that jutted into the river, and he was the most imposing figure Fiona had ever seen. Well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked the sun, he had long dark hair that fell past his shoulders, and a thick beard that could not hide the strong line of his jaw. His arms, bare beneath a leather vest, were corded with muscle that flexed as he bent down, extending a hand toward her. "Here." His voice was deep, commanding. "Give me the boy." Fiona did not question. She lifted Tommy as high as she could, and those powerful arms plucked the child from the water as easily as picking a flower. The man set Tommy safely on the boulder, then reached back down. "Your hand." Fiona grasped it, and she felt the raw power in his grip as he pulled her from the river in one smooth motion. She landed on the boulder, gasping and dripping, her heart hammering against her ribs. Tommy was coughing up water but breathing, his small chest heaving. "You are brave," the man said, his eyes on Fiona. They were blue, she noticed, the color of the sky before a storm. Foolish, maybe, but brave. "Is he alive?" She ignored the comment about herself, focused only on Tommy. "He will be fine. You saved his life." The man lifted Tommy easily and jumped from the boulder to the bank, then turned back to help Fiona across. His hand was warm and rough with calluses when she took it again. By the time they reached the town, a crowd had gathered. Maria Martinez ran forward with a wail, snatching Tommy from the stranger's arms. The boy was crying now, a good sign, and Maria clutched him to her chest. "What happened?" Eduardo Martinez, the blacksmith, pushed through the crowd, his face pale with fear. "The cursed one tried to drown him." Old Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked like a whip. "I saw her pull him into the water." Fiona felt the words like a physical blow. She stepped back, shaking her head. "No, I saved him. He was already in the river." "Liar," someone else shouted. "You probably pushed him in." The crowd's mood shifted, ugly and dangerous. Fiona's wet clothes clung to her body and she felt exposed, vulnerable. She looked around for support but found only hostile faces. "Enough!" The stranger's voice cut through the noise like thunder. He stepped in front of Fiona and the crowd actually moved back from his presence. "I saw everything from the hills. The boy fell in while playing. This woman risked her life to save him. She is a hero, not a villain." Eduardo Martinez looked between the stranger and Fiona, uncertainty crossing his weathered face. "You are sure?" "I am Booker Pierce, and I have lived 30 years without learning to lie." The man crossed his arms over his massive chest. "Your son would be dead if not for her courage. You owe her your thanks, not your accusations." The crowd murmured, confused. They wanted to blame Fiona, needed to blame her, but this stranger's authority was undeniable. He stood like a force of nature himself, immovable and certain. Maria Martinez looked down at her son, then at Fiona. Something flickered in her eyes, not quite gratitude, but perhaps the beginning of doubt in the curse. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly Fiona almost missed it. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, and Fiona found herself alone with the stranger, Booker Pierce. She studied him more carefully now. He wore buckskin pants and tall boots, with a knife at his belt and another strapped to his thigh. A mountain man, then, one of those solitary souls who lived in the wilderness and came to town only when necessary. "Thank you," Fiona said, wrapping her arms around herself. The desert sun was hot, but she felt cold in her wet clothes. "They would have run me out, maybe worse." "They are fools," Booker said simply. He looked at her with those storm blue eyes, really looked at her, and Fiona felt something shift inside her chest. No one had looked at her like that in years, as if she were a person rather than a curse. "What is your name?" "Fiona Oakley." "The one they call cursed." It was not a question. She nodded, waiting for him to make excuses and leave like everyone else did once they knew. Instead, Booker smiled and it transformed his rugged face. "I have been called worse things. Come, you need dry clothes before you catch a chill. I live on the edge of town." She pointed toward her small house. "Then I will walk with you." They walked in silence at first, Fiona acutely aware of the stares they received. Booker Pierce seemed oblivious to the attention, his long strides confident and unhurried. When they reached her house, Fiona expected him to leave, but he examined the crumbling wall with a critical eye. "This needs repair," he said. "The next storm will take it down. I know." Fiona stood awkwardly by her door. "I cannot afford to hire anyone, and no one in town would accept work from me anyway." Booker nodded slowly. "I will fix it." "What? No, I could not ask that." "You did not ask. I offered." He met her eyes again, and Fiona felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. I am camped in the hills north of town. I will come back tomorrow with supplies. Why would you help me? The question burst out before she could stop it. You do not know me. Booker was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I have lived in the wilderness for 12 years, Miss Oakley. I left civilization because people are quick to judge and slow to see truth. I see clearly now, you are not cursed. You are kind and brave. That is all that matters to me. Tears stung Fiona's eyes, unexpected and hot. She blinked them back fiercely. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Booker, he corrected. Just Booker. He tipped his head to her and walked away, his powerful frame moving with surprising grace. Fiona watched until he disappeared around a building, then went inside to change. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned her wet dress. Something had shifted today, though she could not name it yet. For the first time in as long as she could remember, someone had defended her, believed in her, seen her as blessed rather than cursed. She slept better that night than she had in months. True to his word, Booker appeared the next morning leading a mule laden with adobe bricks, timber, and tools. Fiona was hanging laundry when she heard his approach, and her heart did an unexpected jump in her chest. You came, she said, then felt foolish for stating the obvious. I said I would. Booker began unloading the mule with easy efficiency. Do you have water? It is going to be hot work. Fiona brought him a pitcher and a cup, then stood uncertainly. Can I help? Do you know how to mix mortar? No. Then I will teach you. He flashed that transforming smile again. Come here. Fiona spent the morning learning how to mix sand, lime, and water into the right consistency for mortar. Booker was a patient teacher, his deep voice calm as he explained each step. She was intensely aware of his presence, the way his muscles flexed as he lifted heavy bricks, the way sweat made his skin gleam in the sunlight. Once, his hand brushed hers as they both reached for the same tool, and electricity seemed to spark between them. Tell me about yourself, Booker said as they worked. What do you do here in Gila Bend? I wash clothes, Fiona said, and I try to stay out of everyone's way. That is what you do, not who you are. Fiona paused, the question catching her off guard. Who was she? She had spent so long being the cursed girl that she had almost forgotten there might be more to her identity. I like to read, she said slowly. When I can get books, which is not often. I like the river, even after what happened to my brother. I like the way the desert looks in the evening when the light turns everything gold, and I like to sing, though I only do it when I am alone. Why alone? Because they say my voice brings bad luck. Booker snorted. Idiots. Will you sing for me sometime? Maybe, Fiona said, surprised by the offer. If you want. I do. They worked until the sun was directly overhead, and Fiona went inside to prepare lunch. She had little, but she made what she could with beans, tortillas, and some peppers from the market. When she brought the food out, Booker had already made significant progress on the wall. They sat in the shade of her small ramada, eating together. Fiona found herself relaxing in his presence, the initial awkwardness fading. Booker told her about his life in the mountains, about tracking game and reading the signs of the wilderness, about nights spent under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Why did you leave? Fiona asked. Civilization, I mean. Booker's expression darkened. I was married once. Her name was Sarah. We lived in Missouri, had a small farm. She died bringing our child into the world, and the baby died with her. I buried them both on a spring morning, and I knew I could not stay. Everything reminded me of her. So I came west, kept going until there was nothing but wilderness and silence. That was where I learned to live again. I am sorry, Fiona said softly. That must have been terrible. It was, but it was also 12 years ago. The pain is old now, worn smooth like river stones. He looked at her. You have known loss too, I can see it in your eyes. Everyone I have ever loved has died, Fiona said. "My mother, my father, my brother. The town thinks I killed them somehow, that I carry death with me." "You believe that?" "No," Fiona said, and realized it was true. "I think I have been unlucky. But I think they need someone to blame because random tragedy is too frightening. If they can point to a curse, a reason, then they can believe it will not happen to them." "You are wise," Booker said. "Wiser than those fools in town." After lunch, they returned to work. By evening, the wall was largely repaired, solid and straight. Booker stretched, his spine cracking audibly, and Fiona tried not to stare at the way his muscles moved beneath his skin. "I will finish tomorrow," he said. "It needs time to set properly." "Will you stay for supper?" The invitation tumbled out before Fiona could second-guess herself. "It is the least I can do after all your work." Booker's smile was warm. "I would like that." Fiona prepared the best meal she could manage with her limited supplies. Rabbit stew with wild onions and herbs, and bread she had baked that morning. They ate as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The desert came alive in the evening with the sounds of creatures emerging from their daytime hiding places. "You ever get lonely?" Fiona asked. "In the mountains by yourself?" "Sometimes," Booker admitted. "But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely." "I have been alone by choice. You have been lonely despite being surrounded by people. Which do you think is worse?" Fiona considered this. "Mine, I think. At least you chose your solitude." "Exactly." Booker leaned back, his long legs stretched out. "But perhaps neither of us needs to be lonely anymore." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Fiona's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have not felt this comfortable with another person since Sarah died." "I mean I see you, Fiona Oakley, and what I see is beauty and strength and kindness. I mean I would like to keep seeing you if you will allow it." Fiona's heart was racing now. "You have known me for one day." "I have known mountains that revealed their nature in a single glance and others that took years to understand. Sometimes you just know." He reached across the space between them and took her hand, his touch gentle despite his size. "Tell me you do not feel this too, and I will walk away. I will finish your wall and leave, and I will not trouble you again." Fiona looked down at their joined hands, his large and weathered, hers small and pale. She did feel it, this pull toward him that defied explanation. She had felt it from the moment he pulled her from the river, maybe even before that when he was just a shadow blocking the sun. "I feel it," she whispered, "but I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of losing you too. Everyone I love dies, Booker. That is not superstition, that is fact. My family is gone." "All of them." Booker squeezed her hand. "We all die eventually, Fiona, but we do not stop living because we are afraid of dying. We do not stop loving because we fear loss. If we did, what would be the point of any of it? You are not afraid of the curse." "There is no curse. There is only bad luck and worse timing, but our luck can change." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the gesture achingly tender. "Let me prove it to you. Let me show you that you are blessed, not cursed." Fiona felt tears slip down her cheeks, hot and surprising. "How?" "By staying. By not running when things get hard. By loving you the way you deserve to be loved without fear or hesitation." He used his free hand to wipe away her tears, his touch infinitely gentle. "If you will have me, Fiona, I am not an easy man. I am rough and I live rough. But I am honest and I am loyal and I think I am already falling in love with you." "After one day," Fiona's voice broke on the words. "After one day," Booker confirmed. "Sometimes that is all it takes." Fiona searched his face, those storm blue eyes steady and sure. She saw no deception there, no hidden agenda, just raw honesty and something that might have been hope. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will have you. I want to see what blessed looks like." Booker smiled, and then he was pulling her closer, and his lips met hers in a kiss that tasted like possibility and promise. His beard was soft against her skin, and his arms came around her like a fortress, strong and safe. Fiona melted into him, letting herself believe, just for this moment, that maybe the curse was ending. That maybe she was allowed to have this. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, the stars had come out overhead. The desert night was cool, and somewhere a coyote howled at the moon. "I should go," Booker said reluctantly, "but I will be back at dawn to finish the wall." "I will be here," Fiona promised. She watched him disappear into the darkness, leading his mule back toward his camp in the hills. Then she went inside and lay on her narrow bed, her fingers touching her lips where his had been. Sleep was a long time coming, and when it did, she dreamed of mountains and rivers, and a man with storm-blue eyes who called her blessed. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of happiness Fiona had never known. Booker came every day, sometimes to work on her house, other times just to be with her. He fixed her roof, repaired her door, built her a new ramada that provided better shade. He brought her game from his hunting, ensuring she had meat for her table, and he courted her with a quiet intensity that took her breath away. He brought her wildflowers from the mountains, blooms in colors she had never seen. He taught her to track animals by their prints in the dust. He carved her a comb from deer antler, smooth and beautiful. And he listened when she talked, really listened, as if every word she spoke was precious. The town noticed, of course. People whispered and pointed. But Booker's presence beside her acted as a shield. No one dared confront them directly, not with the mountain man's imposing figure always near. And slowly, grudgingly, some of the hostility began to fade. If Booker Pierce, who had no reason to lie, said Fiona was not cursed, perhaps he was right. Perhaps they had been wrong all along. Maria Martinez started leaving her laundry on Fiona's doorstep as usual, but now she included extra coins and sometimes a small bag of vegetables from her garden. It was not much, but it was something. A crack in the wall of superstition that had imprisoned Fiona for so long. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Booker said, "Come live with me." Fiona turned to him, startled. "What? Come live with me in the mountains? I have a cabin about 20 miles north in the high country where the pines grow. It is beautiful there, Fiona. Cool in the summer, peaceful always. We can build a life together away from this town and its prejudices. You want me to just leave?" Fiona's mind was spinning. "Leave everything. What is here for you?" Booker asked gently. "A town that hates you, a house that is falling apart. Laundry work that barely keeps you fed. I am offering you freedom, Fiona. I am offering you a home where you are wanted and loved. But what about supplies? How would we live? I trap and hunt. I sell furs in Tucson twice a year, enough to buy what we need. We would have a garden, chickens maybe. It is simple, but it is good. And you would never again have to bow your head to people who are not worthy to touch the hem of your dress." Fiona looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life like a miracle and turned everything upside down. "You really love me," she said wonderingly. "More than I thought I could love anyone again." Booker cupped her face in his large hands. "Marry me, Fiona. Come away with me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are the blessing, not the curse." "Yes," Fiona breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." Booker kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Fiona felt herself soar. When they broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "When?" Fiona asked. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow, if you want. We can marry in Tucson, find a proper preacher. Then we head north to the cabin. Start our life together." Tomorrow seemed impossibly soon, but also impossibly perfect. Why wait? There was nothing holding Fiona here except bad memories and worse superstitions. "Tomorrow," she agreed. Let me pack my things tonight." Booker helped her gather her meager belongings. She did not have much. Clothes, a few books, her mother's shawl, her father's pocket watch. Everything fit in 2 canvas bags. They worked by lamplight, and every time their eyes met, Fiona felt that same jolt of electricity, that sense of rightness. "Are you afraid?" Booker asked as they finished. "No," Fiona said, and meant it. "I have been afraid my whole life. I am done being afraid. I choose to believe in this in us. I choose to be blessed." "My brave girl," Booker murmured, pulling her close. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, while the desert night sang its ancient songs outside. They left at dawn, before most of the town was awake. Fiona left a note for the few people who had been kind to her over the years, explaining she was leaving but wishing them well. She did not say where she was going. Let them wonder. Let them worry. She was done living her life by their rules and their fears. Booker had brought an extra horse for her, a gentle mare with a patient eye. Fiona had ridden before, though not often, and she settled into the saddle with only a little awkwardness. They headed south toward Tucson, the rising sun at their backs painting their shadows long across the sand. The journey took 2 days of steady riding. They camped the first night in the open desert, and Booker built a fire to keep away the chill and the predators. They ate jerky and hardtack and dried fruit, and Fiona thought it was the best meal she had ever had, simply because she was eating it with him. "Tell me about your cabin," she said as they lay side by side, looking up at the stars. "It is 1 room right now, but solid. Good logs, tight construction. There is a stone fireplace and a sleeping loft. A creek runs about 50 yards from the door, cold and clear. The trees grow thick there, and in the spring, wildflowers cover the meadow. I have seen elk and deer, bears sometimes, mountain lions occasionally. It is wild country, Fiona, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure." "It sounds perfect," Fiona said, and she meant it. She had lived too long in the flat, harsh desert. The idea of mountains and trees and cool water called to something deep in her soul. Booker rolled onto his side, propping his head on one hand. "You might find it lonely at first. There are no neighbors for miles." "I have been lonely surrounded by people," Fiona reminded him. "I think I will prefer being not lonely surrounded by trees." He laughed, that deep rumbling sound she was learning to love. "That is fair." They reached Tucson the next afternoon. The city was bigger than Gila Bend, bustling with commerce and life. Fiona felt overwhelmed by the crowds after so long in isolation, but Booker's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. They found a preacher at the Catholic mission, a kindly older man who agreed to marry them that very evening. Fiona wore the best dress she owned, a simple green cotton that matched her eyes. Booker had bathed and shaved his beard, revealing the strong jaw she had suspected beneath. He wore clean buckskins and a new shirt he had purchased in town, and Fiona thought he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. They spoke their vows in the mission chapel as the sun set, staining the windows red and gold. Fiona's voice shook when she promised to love and honor Booker Pierce for the rest of her life, but she meant every word. And when Booker slid a simple gold band onto her finger, his own voice rough with emotion, she knew he meant his promises too. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said with a smile. "You may kiss your bride." Booker did, thoroughly, and Fiona felt her new life begin in that kiss. She was Fiona Pierce now. The cursed girl of Gila Bend was gone, and in her place stood a woman who was loved and wanted and called blessed. They spent their wedding night in a hotel, a luxury Fiona had never experienced. The bed was soft, the room private, and Booker was gentle and patient as he taught her the intimacies of marriage. Fiona gave herself to him completely, without reservation or fear, and found joy she had not known existed. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, and Fiona thought that if she died tomorrow, at least she would die happy. But she did not die tomorrow. She woke instead to sunshine streaming through the window and her husband's arms around her. Booker was already awake, watching her with such tenderness that Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. "Good morning, wife," he said softly. "Good morning, husband," Fiona replied, testing out the unfamiliar words. They felt right in her mouth. They left Tucson after breakfast, heading north and east into the mountains. The landscape changed as they climbed, the desert giving way to grassland, then scrub, then finally pine forests that smelled of resin and earth. The air grew cooler, thinner, and Fiona breathed it in like wine. It took 3 more days to reach Booker's cabin. They followed game trails and creek beds, climbing higher with each passing mile. Booker pointed out landmarks and animal signs, teaching her to read the wilderness as he did. Fiona absorbed everything like a sponge, fascinated by this new world opening before her. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering ponderosa pines. It was exactly as Booker had described: solid log construction, a stone chimney, a small porch facing east. A meadow stretched beyond it, still green with late summer growth, and she could hear the rush of the creek Booker had mentioned. "Welcome home," Booker said, dismounting and helping her down from her mare. Home. Fiona tested the word in her mind and found it fit perfectly. This was home now, this cabin in the wilderness with this man beside her. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It will be better with you in it," Booker said. He scooped her up in his powerful arms, and Fiona laughed as he carried her across the threshold. Cannot forget tradition. The interior was sparse but clean. A large bed occupied one corner, piled with furs and blankets. A rough-hewn table and 2 chairs sat near the fireplace. Shelves lined one wall, holding supplies and tools. A ladder led up to the sleeping loft Booker had mentioned, though Fiona could not imagine why they would need it when the bed below looked perfectly adequate. "For storage," Booker explained, following her gaze. "And maybe someday for children if we are blessed that way." Children. Fiona had not let herself think that far ahead, but now the possibility bloomed in her mind. A child with Booker's blue eyes and her auburn hair, a family after losing all her own. "I would like that," she said quietly. "Then we will hope," Booker said. He set about building a fire while Fiona explored, touching everything, making the space her own in her mind. There was little in the way of comfort or luxury, but there was something better: peace, quiet, safety, love. That night, they made love again in the big bed, and Fiona felt herself opening like a flower, blooming under Booker's attention and care. She had spent so long believing she was cursed, unworthy of happiness, that accepting this blessing felt almost transgressive. But she was learning. Booker was teaching her, with every touch and word and look, that she deserved joy. The weeks that followed established the rhythm of their new life together. Booker taught Fiona to fish in the creek, to set snares for rabbits, to identify edible plants and avoid poisonous ones. She proved an apt student, and more than once Booker praised her quick mind and quicker hands. Fiona, unused to compliments, glowed under his approval. She took over the domestic tasks, cooking and cleaning and mending, and found satisfaction in caring for their home. She planted a late-season garden near the cabin, hopeful for some harvest before the frost. And in the evenings, she sang for Booker as she had promised, her voice rising pure and clear in the mountain air. He listened with his eyes closed, and sometimes she caught him smiling. "Your voice does not bring bad luck," he told her after one such session. "It brings beauty. Anyone who told you different was a fool." Fiona was happy, truly happy for the first time in her memory. The curse felt like a bad dream, something that had happened to someone else. This was her life now. Mountains and trees, a man who loved her, an endless possibility. But autumn brought challenges. The weather turned cold quickly in the high country, and Booker spent long hours cutting wood for the winter. Fiona helped as she could, stacking the split logs and preparing their supplies. Booker made a trip to Tucson to sell furs and buy necessities, and Fiona spent 3 anxious days alone, jumping at every sound, fearing he would not return. But he did return, his pack laden with flour and sugar and coffee, with fabric for new dresses and seeds for the spring garden. And he brought her a present, a real store-bought book, a novel about a girl in England. Fiona cried when she unwrapped it, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "You said you liked to read," Booker said, looking pleased with himself. "Now you have something to read during the long winter." The first snow fell in late October, transforming the world into something magical. Fiona stood in the meadow with her face turned up to the sky, catching flakes on her tongue like a child. Booker watched her with such love in his eyes that she felt her heart might burst. "I was thinking," he said that night as they lay in bed, the fire crackling cheerfully in the hearth. "We should expand the cabin, add another room, maybe 2, make it a proper house." "Why?" Fiona asked, though she thought she knew. "Because you are pregnant," Booker said calmly, "and we will need more space when the baby comes." Fiona sat up so fast she nearly fell out of bed. "What? How do you know?" "I do not know for certain," Booker admitted, pulling her back down against him. "But you have been tired lately and your courses have not come. And yesterday morning I heard you being sick behind the cabin. Am I wrong?" Fiona's hand went to her belly, still flat beneath her nightdress. She had noticed these things too, but had been afraid to hope, afraid to believe. "You might be right," she whispered. "Are you happy?" Booker asked, and she heard the vulnerability in his voice. He wanted this too, she realized. "Wanted it badly." "I am terrified," Fiona said honestly. "But yes, I am happy, so happy, Booker. We are going to have a baby." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and his hand covered hers on her belly. "We will need to be careful this winter, no risks. You stay close to the cabin and I will do the heavy work." "I am not made of glass," Fiona protested, but she was secretly pleased by his protectiveness. "You are carrying my child," Booker said firmly. "That makes you the most precious thing in my world. I will take no chances with either of you." Winter closed in hard and fast after that. Snow piled high around the cabin and the creek froze solid. Booker had prepared well, though, and they had plenty of supplies to last until spring. The cabin became their entire world, warm and cozy while outside the wind howled and the temperature plummeted. Fiona's pregnancy progressed, her belly swelling with the life inside her. She felt the baby move for the first time in January, a butterfly flutter that made her gasp. Booker insisted on feeling it too, his large hand gentle on her stomach, and his face when he felt the kick was pure wonder. "A fighter," he said proudly, "strong like the mother." They spent the long winter nights talking about their future. Names for the baby, plans for the expanded cabin, dreams for the years ahead. Booker told Fiona stories of his youth in Missouri, and she shared memories of happier times before the curse took hold. They learned each other thoroughly during those months, the way only 2 people trapped together in isolation can. Spring came slowly to the high country, but it came. The snow melted, the creek thawed, and green shoots pushed up through the wet earth. Fiona's belly was huge now, and she moved with the careful waddle of a woman nearing her time. Booker had already begun work on the addition to the cabin, determined to have it finished before the baby arrived. But babies come on their own schedule, not ours. Fiona went into labor on a warm afternoon in late April, 3 weeks earlier than they had calculated. She had been working in the garden when the first pain hit, sharp and unmistakable. "Booker," she called, and he was there in an instant, dropping his tools and rushing to her side. "Is it time?" His face had gone pale beneath his tan. "I think so." Another contraction seized her, and Fiona gripped his arm hard. "It is time." Booker carried her inside and settled her on the bed. He had prepared for this, boiling water and gathering clean cloths, but now that the moment was here, Fiona could see the fear in his eyes. He had lost a wife and child to birth before. The memories must be screaming at him now. "I will be fine," Fiona said, reading his mind. "We will be fine." "You said I was blessed, remember? I choose to believe that." "You are blessed," Booker agreed, but his voice shook. "You are so blessed, Fiona, and strong. The strongest person I know." The labor was long and hard. Fiona had no midwife, no experienced woman to guide her through this. She had only Booker, and he did his best, following instincts and half-remembered advice. He held her hand through the contractions, wiped her face with cool water, encouraged her when she wanted to give up. "I cannot do this," Fiona gasped after hours of labor. The sun was setting outside, painting the cabin in shades of orange and red. "You can," Booker said fiercely. "You are the woman who jumped into a raging river to save a drowning child. You are the woman who survived years of hatred and still remained kind. You are the woman I love more than life itself. You can do this, Fiona. You can do anything." His words gave her strength. When the next contraction came, Fiona bore down with all her might, and again, and again. Pain overwhelmed her, but beneath it was purpose. She was bringing life into the world, her child and Booker's, proof that love could conquer curses. With a final scream, the baby came, sliding into Booker's waiting hands. For a terrible moment, there was silence. Then a lusty wail filled the cabin, and Fiona sobbed with relief. "A boy," Booker said, his voice thick with tears. "We have a son, Fiona, a perfect, healthy son." He cleaned the baby gently and wrapped him in a soft cloth, then placed him in Fiona's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and beautiful, and felt love so fierce it was almost painful. This was her son, her blessing, her proof that the curse was truly broken. "He has your eyes," she whispered. The baby's eyes were blue, that same storm blue as his father's. "He has your courage," Booker replied. He sat beside them on the bed, one arm around Fiona, the other cradling both her and the baby. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names all winter but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son, Fiona knew. "Thomas," she said. "For the boy I saved, the day I met you, the day my life changed." "Thomas Pierce," Booker tested the name. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little man." Baby Thomas yawned, his tiny mouth opening wide, and both parents laughed through their tears. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, but he demanded constant attention. Fiona was tired always, but it was a good tired, the tiredness of a life lived fully. Booker was a devoted father, taking over Thomas's care whenever he could to let Fiona rest. He made a cradle from smooth pine, carved with bears and elk, and rocked his son to sleep while singing in his deep, rumbling voice. Summer came, and Fiona's garden flourished. She harvested vegetables and herbs, preserving what they did not eat right away. The cabin addition was finished, giving them 2 new rooms, one for Thomas and one for storage. It felt almost luxurious after the single room they had started with. On a warm July evening, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas try to crawl, Fiona said, "I want to go back." Booker looked at her sharply. "To Gila Bend?" "Yes." Fiona watched their son determinedly drag himself forward another inch. I want them to see me, see us, see Thomas. I want them to know that the cursed girl is happy and blessed and loved. I want them to know they were wrong. Booker was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure? It could be painful. I am sure. Fiona met his eyes. I am not afraid anymore, Booker. You taught me that. You showed me I was never cursed. Now I want to show them. Then we will go, Booker agreed. When Thomas is a little older, when the weather cools, we will go back to Gila Bend and we will show them exactly how blessed you are. They made the journey in September, when Thomas was 5 months old and the desert heat had begun to ease. It took longer traveling with a baby, but they moved at a comfortable pace, camping under the stars and following the familiar trails south. Gila Bend looked exactly the same when they rode in, dusty and harsh and unwelcoming. But Fiona sat straight in her saddle, her son strapped to her chest in a carrier Booker had made, and she felt no fear. She was not the cursed girl anymore. She was Fiona Pierce, wife and mother, and she was blessed beyond measure. They stopped at the general store first. Mr. Hendricks, the owner, stared at them with his mouth open. Fiona Oakley. Is that you? Fiona Pierce now, Fiona corrected with a smile. This is my husband, Booker, and our son, Thomas. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd had gathered. Fiona saw familiar faces, some hostile, some merely curious. Maria Martinez pushed through, her eyes widening when she saw the baby. You are alive, Maria said wonderingly. And you have a child. I am alive and well, Fiona confirmed. Better than I have ever been. I came back to show you all that I was never cursed. I was only unlucky, and that luck has changed. Look at me. Look at my family. This is what blessed looks like. Old Mrs. Henderson sniffed. One child does not prove anything. Perhaps not, Booker said, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs. But a woman who jumps into a raging river to save a drowning child, who survives years of cruelty with her kindness intact, who builds a life from nothing and loves without reservation, that woman is blessed beyond question. You were wrong about her, all of you, and you should be ashamed. Silence fell over the crowd. Some people had the grace to look embarrassed. Maria Martinez stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I am sorry, she said to Fiona. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Can you forgive us? Fiona looked at the woman who had been among her accusers, who had blamed her for her own son's near drowning. She could hold this grudge, could let it poison her. But what would be the point? She had everything she wanted. She had won, not through vengeance, but through living well. I forgive you, Fiona said simply. All of you. I do not need your apologies, but I accept them. I hope you will think twice before you call someone cursed again. They stayed in Gila Bend for 3 days, visiting the few people who had shown Fiona kindness over the years and accepting the awkward apologies of others. Fiona sold her old house to a young couple just starting out, using the money to buy supplies for the cabin. And on the 3rd day they rode north again, back toward the mountains and the life they had built. Do you feel better? Booker asked as Gila Bend disappeared behind them. Having gone back, I do, Fiona said. I feel like that chapter of my life is finally closed. No more cursed girl, no more looking over my shoulder, just moving forward with you and Thomas. Then it was worth the journey. Booker reached over and took her hand, and they rode like that for a while, connected even across the space between their horses. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler, then a boy, strong and bright and curious like his parents. When he was 3, Fiona gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Booker's first wife. Booker cried when Fiona suggested the name, moved beyond words by her generosity. Sarah was followed 2 years later by another son, James, and then 3 years after that by twin girls, Emma and Grace. The cabin expanded again to accommodate the growing family, becoming a proper house with multiple rooms and a real glass window in the front. Fiona had never been so tired or so happy. Her days were full of children's laughter and tears, of cooking and cleaning and teaching. Booker hunted and trapped and built, providing for his family with tireless dedication. And in the evenings, when the children were finally asleep, husband and wife would sit together on the porch and marvel at the life they had created. "You ever regret it?" Fiona asked one such evening. Thomas was 8 now, already showing signs of his father's size and strength. "Taking a chance on the cursed girl. Every day," Booker said seriously, and Fiona's heart skipped a beat before she saw the laughter in his eyes. "I regret that I did not find you sooner, that you had to spend even one day believing you were cursed. But I do not regret a single moment since I pulled you from that river. You are the blessing of my life, Fiona Pierce. You always have been." "And you are mine," Fiona said softly. "You saw me when no one else would. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You proved with your love that curses can be broken and blessings can be found in the most unlikely places." "In mountain streams and desert towns," Booker agreed. "In the eyes of a brave woman who refused to let the world defeat her. In the arms of a mountain man who called me blessed," Fiona finished. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in colors too beautiful to name. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, safe and loved. The curse was a distant memory now, a story they would tell their children someday about how perseverance and love can overcome even the darkest superstitions. Thomas grew into a man much like his father, tall and broad and strong, with the same storm-blue eyes and gentle heart. He helped Booker with the trapping and hunting, learning the ways of the wilderness. Sarah was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for healing that led her to study with a traveling doctor who passed through once. James was the scholar, always reading whatever books they could acquire, dreaming of cities and universities. Emma and Grace were inseparable, two halves of a whole, equally skilled with rifle and needle. Booker's hair turned gray at the temples, and his face lined with age, but his strength never diminished. He could still fell a tree with a dozen axe strokes and carry a deer carcass on his shoulders without strain. Fiona's auburn hair developed streaks of silver, and her hands grew rough from years of work, but her eyes still shone with the same joy they had held on her wedding day. When Thomas turned 20, he married a girl from Tucson, a sweet-faced young woman named Mary who fit into the family as if she had always belonged. They built a cabin near Booker and Fiona's, and soon there were grandchildren underfoot, adding to the chaos and the love. Sarah married a rancher and moved south, but she visited often, bringing her own children to play with their cousins. James went east for school, as they had always known he would, but he wrote letters faithfully and came home every summer. Emma and Grace married brothers, trappers who worked the territory with Booker, and they all lived within a day's ride of each other. The family grew and flourished, spreading across the mountains like the wildflowers Fiona had always loved. And at the center of it all were Booker and Fiona, the mountain man and the woman they had called cursed, who had proven that love could overcome anything. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Booker surprised Fiona with a trip back to Tucson, just the two of them. Their children were grown now, capable of managing without them for a few days. They stayed in the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, and Booker gave her a gift, a locket with a tiny painting of him inside. "So you can keep me close to your heart always," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "You are already there," Fiona said, touching the locket. "You have been since the day you pulled me from the river and called me brave. You were brave. You are brave." Booker pulled her into his arms, and despite the years and the gray in their hair, the spark between them was as strong as ever. "My blessed girl." "Your blessed wife," Fiona corrected, kissing him, "and I intend to remain blessed for many more years." They returned to the mountains renewed, ready for whatever the future might bring. And the future brought grandchildren in abundance, 23 in total by the time Fiona was 60. Each one was a blessing, each one a refutation of the curse that had once defined her. Booker lived to 75, still strong almost to the end. He died peacefully in his sleep one winter night, with Fiona beside him and his children and grandchildren filling the house. Fiona held his hand as he slipped away, and though her heart broke, she did not regret a single moment of their life together. She lived another 8 years without him, surrounded by family, telling stories of the mountain man who had saved her in more ways than one. She spoke of the day he pulled her from the river, the day he kissed her under the stars, the day their first child was born. She told her grandchildren that love was the strongest force in the world, stronger than superstition, stronger than fear, stronger even than death. When Fiona finally died at 83, she was buried beside Booker on a hillside overlooking their cabin. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, and every one of them knew the story of the girl they called cursed and the mountain man who called her blessed. In the years that followed, the story became legend in those mountains. People spoke of Fiona Pierce with reverence, of her courage and kindness, of the love she and Booker had shared. Young couples would visit their graves and promise to love each other as fiercely and faithfully. And always, always, there were wildflowers growing there, bright splashes of color against the green grass, as if the earth itself was celebrating the blessings that had grown from such dark beginnings. The cabin still stood decades later, maintained by generations of Pierces who refused to let it fall. It became a gathering place for the family, a reminder of where they came from and what their ancestors had overcome. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew through the pines just right, some swore they could hear singing, a woman's voice pure and clear, and the deep rumble of a man's laughter in response. The curse was broken, thoroughly and completely, shattered by love and faith, and the unwavering belief of one man in one woman's essential goodness. Fiona Oakley, who had been called cursed her entire youth, became Fiona Pierce, matriarch of a family that stretched across the territory, beloved and blessed beyond measure. And it all began on a hot afternoon in Gila Bend, Arizona, when a mountain man pulled a drowning woman from a river and saw not a curse, but a blessing waiting to unfold. Everything that came after, every child and grandchild, every moment of joy and love, flowed from that single act of faith. Booker Pierce had looked at Fiona Oakley and seen her true nature, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible, the freedom to become who she was always meant to be. In the end, that was the real miracle. Not that the curse was broken, but that there had never been a curse at all. There was only a girl who had been unlucky, and a man who had been wise enough to see past superstition to the truth beneath. And from that truth, from that recognition and love, an entire legacy was born. The last Pierce to live in the original cabin was a great-great-granddaughter named Fiona, named for the woman who had started it all. She kept the carved cradle that Booker had made for Thomas, and the deer antler comb he had carved for his wife, and the locket with his picture inside. She tended their graves and told their story to anyone who would listen, ensuring that future generations would know about the cursed girl and the mountain man, and how love had transformed them both. And on summer evenings, when the light turned gold and the wildflowers bloomed bright, Young Fiona would sit on the porch of that cabin and imagine she could see them. Booker and Fiona, young and in love, building the life that would eventually encompass so many others. She would touch the locket around her own neck, a replica of the one Booker had given his wife, and she would whisper thanks to the ancestors who had given her this legacy of love. The mountains kept their secrets, but they also kept their promises. And the promise of Booker and Fiona's love echoed through generations, a testament to the power of seeing people as they truly are, not as the world names them. Cursed or blessed, it was all a matter of perspective. Booker Pierce had chosen to see blessing, and in doing so, he had created it. That was the final truth of their story. Blessings are not found, they are made. They are created through acts of faith and courage, through choosing love over fear, through refusing to accept the labels the world tries to force upon us. Fiona had been called cursed, but Booker called her blessed, and his love made it so. And in a cabin in the mountains of Arizona, surrounded by the family that grew from their union, that blessing continued generation after generation, a light that would never go out. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of superstition and fear, and it would endure long after both of them were gone. A monument not of stone but of love, the strongest foundation of all.